I want to juxtapose my day yesterday with our hearing today. Yesterday, we spent the day marking the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords. Started the morning with a group of young people from the Accord countries, young people who brimmed with optimism and promise of possibilities of building relationships and pursuing peace. We spoke about new paradigms and bridges to understanding. And today we talk about Iran, a violator of human rights, pursuing a nuclear program, state sponsor of terrorism, drones being sold to Russia in their fight against Ukraine, piracy, assassination, and, Mr. Rule, you said seeking hegemony in the region for their own purposes and economic means. Ms. Maloney, you talked about the diplomatic efforts to constrain Iran's nuclear advances, and they've had little effect for the last 40-plus years, 30-plus years. Few meaningful breakthroughs or sustained reversals, and you said quite clearly it's time for a new approach. Now, in 2015, I opposed the JCPOA because I felt it didn't go far enough. It didn't solve the problem. It may have solved the problem of the physics, but it didn't solve the problem of the geopolitics and had the sunsets that left Iran a nuclear power in the end. But I also opposed pulling out of the JCPOA in 2017 and 2018 because we hadn't strengthened our hand in the intervening time. We hadn't laid a new foundation to create a better way to block and ultimately permanently close Iran's pathways to a nuclear bomb. Again, Ms. Maloney, as you said, deterring Iran will require a much higher level of vigilance from the U.S. and our partners in Europe, in the Middle East, and beyond. Mr. Ben Tableau, you said we need to connect the dots. I think you're right, but I think it's more than that. It's more than just dots. It's the lines that connect us around the world, the seams where things come together. It's the overlaps extending beyond the Gulf and the entire Middle East, the war in Ukraine, the great power politics. In fact, it runs across our entire foreign policy. This administration and those before have continued to make it crystal clear that all options are on the table, including military force. And I was pleased to lead with my colleague, the chair, to say that the U.S. is committed to making sure Iran never, ever has a nuclear weapon. But finding a non-kinetic solution is certainly better than war to reverse Iran's nuclear program and other nefarious activities. In particular, it's a combination of stronger ties with our allies and combined sanctions, sanctions that unfortunately will begin to diminish immediately after being implemented, so we need to ratchet them up over and over again. We need to have the will and the resolve with ourselves and our allies. So having given a longer speech than I intended, let me ask the question. All right, Ms. Maloney, I'll start with you. We need a new paradigm. You laid it out a little bit. What are the most important things we can do here in Congress to lay the groundwork, to do what hasn't been achieved in the past, to better thwart Iran, to better send the signal that we have the resolve and the will that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and we will do everything necessary to ensure we achieve that goal?
My fellow witness listed a number of bills that are before the Congress, and I think many of them do, in fact, help to advance the overall goal of ensuring that we deter Iran and that we prevent Iran from ever having a nuclear weapons capability. But you mentioned the Abraham Accords, and there's been discussion of the recent delegation trip to the region, and I think that there is much more that this body can do in terms of discussions and conversations with policymakers from across the Middle East, who in many cases are seeking to find ways to mitigate their own threat from Iran by essentially providing economic incentives. We need to ensure that, first and foremost, obviously we have a close, robust partnership with the Israelis who have been with us every step of the way. But that needs to be the case with our partners in the Gulf, who often play both sides of the aisle, especially as we talk about a potential expansion of the Abraham Accords. It's got to be crystal clear to the Saudis and to the other Gulf Arabs that their cooperation, their enforcement of U.S. sanctions, their insurance that they do not somehow incentivize the Islamic Republic to think that it can survive this current challenge is going to be absolutely critical.
Mr. Rule, let me turn to you, because your career spans 34 years with the CIA. It was about 30 years ago we started raising the alarm bells about Iran's nuclear program. We've done so many things, talked about so many ideas to thwart it, but today where we sit, Iran has enough material to build nuclear weapons. They're advancing in that program, and they're making are reinforcing relations with China and Russia. And I'm past my time, but if you can answer, what's the most important thing we need to do now to make sure we change the path we're going on?
Consistency of a policy that says we're open to diplomacy, but will absolutely use military force in certain circumstances. The absence of consistency has catastrophic consequences for our diplomacy. Suzanne Malone is one of the wisest people in Washington, and her comments on the Gulf states are spot on. I'm going to give you an example of when we went to Gulf states and we said we would like you to cut your ties with your economic ties with Iran. And some of them severely cut their economic ties with Iran at great cost to their own economies. These states were then told in the newspaper we were secretly negotiating with Iran and that a president of the United States had offered to even engage the Iranian president of the United Nations. You have to think, what does that mean today when we ask these same countries to cut their ties with Russia? Do they expect that we will have a secret back channel that will result in the President of the United States meeting Vladimir Putin in another location? This absence of consistency from one administration to another is corrosive and helps Iran.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for giving me the extra time. I'll take 2 more seconds to say you opened by talking about bipartisanship. If we can achieve consistency in Congress, the best way to do that is continuing our work together across party lines, Republicans and Democrats. I appreciate your leadership, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Brad Schneider. And indeed, Congressman Schneider and I have worked together on different issues, and we shall continue. With this, I'm really grateful that we have Congressman Jim Baird of Indiana.